Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Samasta Jana Kalyani Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram Namah Shri Shankarananda Guru Padambu Janmani Savilasa Mahamoha Graha Grasaika Karmani. Okay, so let's read verses 27 to 29, or actually 26, so that we get the thought flow. 26 to 29. Ekame vadvitiyam sada siddham atra tu kechana vihvala sadevedam purasiditya varnayan Magnasyabdhau yathakshani vihvalani tathasya dhihi akhande karasam shrutva nishprachara bibhetyataha gauracharya nirvikalpe samadhavanya yoginam sakara brahmanishtanam atyantam Bhayamuchire Asparsha yogo namesha Durdarsha sarva yogibihi Yogino bhibhyati yasmat Abhaye bhayadarshinaha. So what's happening here now in Panchadashi is that we've established that Sat is Advaita. It's Ekam Eva Advitiya. It's that one alone, which is non-dual. And this means that there are absolutely no differences in Sat. No internal differences, no difference with another species, no difference within the same species. There's just one Sat. And there are some here that Swami Vidyaranyaji says that there's still some who are confused about this Sat, and they think that it's Asat. Asat means non-existence, that before creation there was non-existence alone. So who is he saying here? He's talking about the Shunyavadi Buddhists. Now, as I explained to you last time, there's so many different interpretations of what the Buddhists actually said. And there's also so many schools of Buddhism, right? There's the Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, there's the Vijnanavadin, and then there's the Shunyavadin. And then in the Shunyavadin, or what we call Madhyamika, there's also some different schools within that. So we will say that for the purposes of this, we will talk about those who think that non-existence was before creation. There are also those who think that there is something, but it just can't be explained, right? So here, for the purposes of this analysis, we're going to limit it to those who just think that it was non-existence, asat. Because I don't think it's also okay to think about what their school says without thoroughly analyzing. So let's just take it to mean that one segment. And so he says now, those who think that non-existence was there in the beginning, they fall into like a deep sea, which we see in verse 27. because it's as though, they can't comprehend this reality. So just like somebody who has fallen into the sea, they become afraid when they hear that there is something called this reality. This is not just for those who believe that non-existence alone was. This is also for us who, because we cannot comprehend this sat, this existence is beyond the ken of the mind and senses. So when there's something that we cannot grasp, we are afraid of it. We're afraid because we feel that there's something bigger and more powerful than us. And so, as though we're drowning in the sea and we limit ourselves, we don't want to know what it is. And we don't think that there's something there, because how can there be something more powerful, greater than me? And this is also seen in verse 28, we see in the Sakara Brahmanishta, and those people who worship that ultimate reality with the form, they're also afraid to drop that form. They're also afraid to drop that form and immerse themselves in that which is formless. Because again, it requires losing our individuality. And Gaudapada says that this existence, this truth or reality is asparsha, means there's no contact with it. There's no contact with this reality. So my mind cannot grasp it. My senses cannot perceive it. My intellect cannot think about it. I cannot analyze it. There's no contact with this reality, and it's durdarsha. It's very, very difficult because there is no contact. There is no foothold. And he says that in that which is the absolute fearlessness, in that Brahman, which is absolute fearlessness, people are afraid of it. People are afraid of getting to Brahman or realizing their nature as Brahman, because it requires losing our individuality. And we talked about this. It requires us just letting go. Just letting go of our identification with the body, the mind, the senses, and just being a witness, just being present and having everything happen in our presence. We're so afraid because we feel like if we don't propel, if we don't guide, if we don't instruct, how will things move? How will things work? But actually, this requires such a deep surrender, because if we are able to just withdraw ourselves, everything does move, everything does work, everything does happen, and even more beautifully than we would have done it. The minute we insert our ego there, there's all these, this power, there's this control, there's this insistence, there's this desire. All of these things come into play the minute we insert our ego into that picture and feel that, yes, I'm this doer, and yes, I'm this experiencer. But the minute we just withdraw ourselves back, it's such an actually beautiful feeling, because everything just flows. And what one feels is not the desire to control or to possess or to insist, but what one feels is the marvel at how such beauty can actually flow and take place. This is that freedom. But that freedom requires that surrender, that being able to lose our individuality in totality. And that pure awareness, it requires that. And so those who don't grasp this, they find fear in that which is fearless. And one powerful example is like, there's a man, let's say there's a man, and at night he falls off a cliff. He falls off a cliff, and then what happens is he grabs onto a tree, and he's holding on, and he has this conversation with God and says, what do I do? Can you please help me? And Bhagavan says, all I need you to do is let go. And he says, what? I can't let go because I will fall. I'll fall. So Bhagavan says, just trust me, let go. He says, no, I don't want to let go. And so this man spends the whole night holding on to this tree, to the branch of the tree, and to the point of switching hands here and there, so stressed, so pressured, just holding on to that tree for his dear life. And when the sun rises in the morning, what happens is he looks around and he looks down, and he's actually just a foot off the ground. Had he let go, he would have been free. He would have been truly free, right? And so this is our problem. Our problem is that we're holding on to this tree and we're saying, I'm in control, and I want to do it. But if we just let go, such vastness awaits us, but we are afraid. So Advaita is not easy. There's a lot of letting go. So that first we have to, that's why in the Bhagavad Gita, it's so beautifully put that whoever wants to let go of the ego, first let go of the results of actions, let go of the insistence of the results of actions. Because if we can't even practice that, how are we going to let go of our ego? So this is what Gaudapada says. Okay. Now let's read verses 30 and 31. 30 is by Adi Shankaracharya ji, and then 31 is by Sureshwaracharya ji. So let's read. Bhagavat puja padascha, shushka tarka patu namun, ahurmadhyamikan bhrantan, achintyesmin sadatmani, Bhagavat puja padascha, shushkatarka patu namu, ahurmadhyamikan bhrantan, achintyesmin sadatmani. So maybe we'll take this verse so that way it's clear. Bhagavat puja padaha. So this is a reference to Adi Shankaracharya ji. Pada, whose feet are worshipful. Puja pada. Bhagavat. Bhagavat means those who are endowed with the 6 bhagas, these 6 Aishwarya, lordship, Shriya, wealth, yasha, fame, dharma, vairagya, moksha, who are endowed with these qualities unlimited. So it also not only implies to God or Lord, but also those people who have these qualities. So Bhagavat means these worshipful people who have these qualities worship his feet. So the worshipful worship his feet. And who is this? Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya ji. So, I mean, we all know why he's worshipped. I won't go too much into that, but really someone who's given his life to write these commentaries and spread this beautiful message. This is something that we still benefit from today. That alone, there's so many more things he did, but even if we just think of that we're indebted to it, right? It's so priceless. So Bhagavat puja padaha, and it's in plural because it's out of respect. What does he say? Ahuhu. He says that madhyamikan, this particular school of Buddhists, and I told you there's also several schools of madhyamika. So let's not go into too much into it. Bhrantan, there's a confusion there. Why? Shushka tarika patun amun. They're using what is called, they're experts, patu, in shushka tarka, dry logic. Shushka, dry, tarka, logic. How? Achintye, asmin achintye, in that which is beyond thought, in that Brahman, Sadatmani, which is beyond thought, they use thought. So now this is not only for them, this is for all of us who are trying to grasp this reality just with thought. Because some people, we will see in the next verse, they don't have, it's very, very scary, this Brahman, which is that which illumines the thought, that which illumines everything, that which makes the ears hear, the eyes see, the tongue taste. This is very scary. So now how can we use thought to analyze that which is beyond thought? How do we do that? So Adi Shankaracharya ji, he criticized this point. So get this straight, this point. These philosophies are so comprehensive, and they're also so incredibly deep, but solely limiting to logic. It says also in our Upanishads, Naisha Tarka Apaneya. This truth we cannot grasp with logic. It takes something much deeper. So now Adi Shankaracharya ji says this is a limitation. Trying to grasp that which cannot be thought of through thought, through logic, that's a limitation. Now, Sureshwaracharya ji, in verse number 31, now he also points out to a further limitation. So let's see verse 31. Anadritya shrutim morkhyat, anadritya shrutim morkhyat, ime bodhastamasvinaha, ime bodhastamasvinaha, apa apedire niratmatvam, apedire niratmatvam, anumaneka chakshushaha, anumaneka chakshushaha, anadritya shrutim morkhyat, ime bodhastamasvinaha, apedire niratmatvam, anumaneka chakshushaha. So now what is Sureshwaracharya ji saying here? And this is found in Naishkarmya Siddhi, this verse 31. He says, Anadritya. So what he's criticizing is not taking recourse to scriptures or Shruti. Anadritya. No adara for Shruti. So, morkyat ime bodha tamas ime. So they are merged in darkness because they're not taking recourse in the scriptures. Aped ire niratmatvam. And therefore they attain this niratmatvam, this shunyatva. And anumaneka chakshusha. And there they use only one eye of logic. So again, here, what's being criticized? Now just think, okay? As I said, our limitation, my limitation, of course, is that I'm not so well versed with the Buddhist schools, and so I don't want to criticize them outright without knowing full well. But what's being criticized here? Let's just focus on the thought process. What's being criticized here is not taking recourse to Shruti, not taking recourse to Shastra. So if you see in Vedanta, there are three ways to really come to terms with something or have a clear conviction or understanding with something. The first is what we call Shruti, right? So in Vedanta, the scriptures are pramana, or a means of knowledge. It's not an individual being. So it's not an individual being. It's not one person. It's not one teacher. That's why in Hinduism, there's really no founder. It's Sanatana Dharma. What it is that we take recourse to the scriptures and go to a guru who is able to understand those scriptures in the proper context. So very often, we might take recourse to scriptures. We might go to the Upanishads and we might read them, but we may completely misinterpret them or misunderstand them, and we might even twist them. So the Vedas specifically say that if we were to just speak or we were to just use our own thinking, we would be defective in the way that we communicate, in the sense that, number one, our knowledge may be limited, right? We might have very limited knowledge, but the Veda is trying to tell us something so far and deep. The second is, maybe if we were to interpret it the way we want, we have limitations. There may be things that we just can't understand. Or if we interpret things the way we want, or we start speaking about things just based on our logic or our perception, what happens is we might twist and turn things based on our likes and dislikes. So we might say, you know what, I don't like this, so I don't want to talk about it. Or I like this, so I will focus on it. So we might have these likes and dislikes. So if we strictly stick to our own logic, all these limitations will be there. And so in Advaita Vedanta, it's very adamant that we follow the Upanishadic thought, and that we have a guru or we have a teacher who is able to see that in the context of the whole Shastra, and not just take it out of, just quote one verse and say, this is what it says, right? So Shruti, that's given importance, and then the logic based on the Shruti. So not that we're applying our own logic, but there's an actual scripture that we're basing it on. Why is this Shruti important? Because it talks about that which is beyond the ken of our senses and mind. We don't have anything. If we wanted to know something which is in the ken of our senses, if we wanted to know the time, okay, sure, look at it. If we want to know how something smells, okay, smell it. But this is something that's beyond our thoughts, beyond our realm of thinking. So therefore, it says, look at that scripture, because that's what tells you. And don't only look at that scripture, study it, but use the logic according to the scripture, which is yukti, and then finally come to experience it for yourself, which is anubhuti. Come to see it in your own life. And so this is the way that we come to terms with something, or this is the way we realize, actually. This is the way we realize. These are the paths of Shravanam, Mananam, and Vidhyasana. Shravanam is the Shruti, taking recourse to Shruti. Mananam is the Yukti, taking recourse to logic. And Nididhyasanam is Anubhuti. It's really contemplating it on it so deeply that eventually we come to terms with it. So he says, if somebody doesn't take recourse to this, then what happens is it's like only looking at, it's only like having one eye, Anumanam Eka Chakshusha, only having one eye of inference, but not the other eye of scripture or reverence, not that other eye. So our two eyes are, one is Shruti, one is Yukti. And when we're able to see clearly with that, then we get that Anubhuti. Now, this is according to Sureshwaracharya. Okay. Now, what follows here from 32 to about verse 40 is this conversation, this healthy debate between shunyata, those who believe that non-existence alone existed, and the Advaita Vedantins who believe that existence was. So sad eva somya idam agrasi is what the Advaitins believe in. And then asad eva is what the shunyata paksha is, the shunyata side is. Okay, so we're going to see how both of them kind of speak to each other and then come to terms with sat, right? And this is so that we also understand how to logically think about something. So let's see now from verse 32. Shunyamasidi brushe, Shunyamasidi brushe, Sadyogam vasadatmatam, Sadyogam vasadatmatam, Shunyasya natu tadyuktam, Shunyasya natu tadyuktam, Ubhayam vyahatatvatah, Ubhayam vyahatatvatah, Shunyamasīditi brushe sadyogam va sadatmatam shunyasya natu tadyuktam ubhayam vyahatatvatah. Okay, so now here, so the Advaitin is asking the ones from the Shunya side, Shunyam Asit. So you are saying that non-existence was. Non-existence was. Iti brushe. This is what you say. Now, I'm asking you, is it sadyogam or sadatmatam? Is it the relationship? Some sadyoga means some yoga. Is it the relationship of contact? Or sadatmata? Is it the relationship of oneness? Shunyasya natu tadyuktam. This is not appropriate in shunya. Ubhayam vyahatatvatah. Excuse me. Because of their self-cancellation. So, what is he saying here? Advaitin is saying, look, I'm giving you two relationships. One is what we call samyoga, relationship of contact. So, like the contact of this book with this book holder, right? The contact. So there's one thing and it has contact with the other. This is called samyoga sambandha. Then we have tadatmya, which is sadatma here. Tadatmya, relationship of oneness, wherein like here, the yellow color permeates the cloth. So it's called yellow cloth, right? So if you say non-existence was, what relationship is it? It cannot be the relationship of contact. Why? Because one will be existence, non-existence. One will be non-existence, there will be existence, right? Non-existence was. So one is non-existence, one is existence. You cannot have contact between existence and non-existence. So therefore, that cancels out itself. And the second thing is that you cannot have non-existence permeate existence, because again, they're two opposing things. So there cannot be oneness between two opposing things, non-existence and existence. So therefore, there's a self-cancellation in what you're saying. Then the Advaitin says, let me give you an example so that you understand. So 33 is the example. Na yuktas tamasa suryaha, na yuktas tamasa suryaha, na pichasau tamo mayaha, na pichasau tamo mayaha, satshunyayor virodhitvat, satshunyayor virodhitvat, shunyamasit katham vada. Shunyamasit katham vada. Na yuktas tamasa suryaha, na pichasau tamo mayaha, satshunyayor virodhitva, shunyamasit katham vada. So he says, na yukta. It's not appropriate. Tamasa suryaha na api. Yuktam here means there cannot be a relationship of contact like Surya. Surya means the sun and darkness. So sun and darkness, they're two opposing things. They cannot come in contact with each other. When there is brightness, there's no darkness. When there's darkness, there's no brightness. So the sun, right, and darkness, they cannot come in contact with each other. Two opposing things. Then, na apicha aso tamo mayaha. And the sun also cannot mix with the nature of darkness. Darkness cannot penetrate the sun because the sun is of the nature of light, of brightness. So darkness cannot penetrate. So therefore, he says, Sat shunya yoho viroditvat. Viroditvat, there is a viroda, there's a contradiction between sat, existence, and asat, non-existence. Asat is non-existent, shunya is also non-existent in this context. So therefore he says, shunya asit. If you say non-existence was, katham vada, how are you saying? How are you saying non-existence was? There is a contradiction to your statement. So then the Bodha, the Shunyavadi, says, I can tell you how it works. Let me tell you how it works. There's a logical way that two opposing things can coexist, and I'll show you. So he gives it here on 34. Vyadadir namarupe, Vyadadir namarupe, Mayaya suvikalpite, Mayaya suvikalpite, Shunyasya namarupe cha, Shunyasya namarupe cha, Tatha chet jivyatam chiram, Tatha chet jivyatam chiram. Vyadadir namarupe, Mayaya suvikalpite, Shunyasya namarupe cha, Tatha chet jivyatam chiram. So he says, look, in your side, Vyadade means akasha, space, etc., name and form, suvikalpite, are superimposed on sat, right? In your side, all of these names and forms of space, air, fire, water, air, all of them are superimposed on sat. So, okay, the Advaitin says yes, but he says, look, all of them are actually asat, isn't it? Because we say that names and forms are apparent realities, right? They're apparent realities. They're not absolute reality. They're apparent reality, and they're superimposed on sat. So these apparent realities are non-existence. They're non-existence. They're superimposed on existence only. So you also have that, right? So what I'm saying here is non-existence is superimposed on existence. You're saying that, I'm saying that, we are saying the same thing, right? So the Advaitin says, well, if that's what you're saying, tatha chet jivyatam chira, may you live long, because you've fallen into a trap. So what is the thinking here? Two things, right? Two opposing things cannot coexist if they're in the same degree of reality. Like light and darkness, they cannot coexist in the same degree of reality, right? Hunger and fullness, they cannot coexist in the same degree of reality. But in different degrees of reality, they can coexist. You can be hungry in your dream, but very much full, you know, when you wake up. We can be very much rich in our dream, but poor when we wake up. So in different degrees of reality, opposing things can exist. Like we say, the dry sand and the mirage water, right? So now he says, so the Buddhist said this, and then Advaitin said, may you live long. So the Buddhist is thinking, okay, wait. So I said that non-existence is superimposed on sat. So then the Advaitin says, okay, great. It's superimposed on sat. But the Buddhist is saying, well, why can't this sat also be superimposed on something? Why can't sat also be superimposed on something? Why, why can't sat also be asat? Why can't sat also be false? So now here in verse 35, the Advaitin is going to say, if sat is also superimposed, where is it superimposed in? This is the retort of the Advaitin. So let us see this. Today is kind of a very logical thing, but bear with me. Satopi namarupe dve, Satopi namarupe dve, kalpite chettada vada, kalpite chettada vada, kutreti niradishthanah, kutreti niradishthanah, na brahma quat, na brahma quachit ikshate, na brahma quachit ikshate, satopi namarupe dve, kalpite chettada vada, kutreti niradishthanah, na brahma kvachidikshate. So if you say now you will notice that what I'm using is slightly different from the translation here. I'm basing it on one of the Sanskrit commentaries. So he says that now if you say that sat could be superimposed also, he says, what will sat be superimposed on? What will sat be superimposed on? What will this reality be superimposed on? Can sat be superimposed on sat? No, right? So this truth cannot be superimposed on truth. Why? Because the whatever superimposed was always different from the substratum. So sat cannot be superimposed on sat. Then can sat be superimposed in asat? Can the truth or existence be superimposed in non-existence? No, we can't do that. Can sat or existence be superimposed in the world? No, because it says sadeva sopya idam agra asi, means the world came after sat. The world came after sat. So how is sat going to be superimposed in the world? So sat is not superimposed on anything. Sat or existence is the substratum upon which everything is superimposed. Because have you ever seen something superimposed without a substratum? So he says, if you say sat is superimposed, putra, where would it be superimposed? It can't be superimposed in anything. And what we see here is that every single illusion has a substratum. So therefore, sat or existence alone is the substratum. Sat existence alone is the reality. So this is the counter argument. Now, bear with me a moment and I'm going to summarize this for you so that we get the clear thought flow. And I had it also written down that way. It's just easier. Okay, give me a sec. So here's the thought flow, right? So the thought flow is this. First, if you say, right, that shunyam or non-existence is, then there's, or non-existence was rather, then there's a flaw of contradiction, right? If you say non-existence was, what kind of relationship can they have? Because one thing exists, one thing doesn't exist. So they cannot have a relationship of contact, nor can they have a relationship of oneness because they're two opposing things. Can you give me an example? Yes, I can give you an example. It's like the sun, right? So in the sun, you cannot have darkness and brightness together. You cannot have them because they're two opposing things. And you cannot say darkness permeates brightness. You cannot do that. They're two opposing things. So then the Purva Pakshin, the opponent, says, well, you have two opposing things come together. How? You have names and forms of these five elements which are apparently existing, which you can say in non-existence, coming in contact with Sat. So I'm also saying the same thing, Asat in Sat. Asat is superimposed in Sat. Non-existence was. So the reasoning there again is we can have two opposing things existing in the same sort of two opposing things can coexist only if they have a different degree of reality, not the same degree of reality, right? So we say that's the answer. It's because they have two opposing, two different degrees of reality. Then he says, okay, if you say that, and that's fine, but what is this sat that you're talking about? Maybe this sat, this reality that you're talking about, is also superimposed on something. How do we know it's not superimposed on something? So then that Vedanta says, well, what would it be superimposed on? It cannot be superimposed on itself, or it cannot be superimposed in non-existence, or it cannot even be superimposed in the world. So that reality alone exists, and it's the substratum of everything, because we've never seen an illusion, a superimposition without any substratum. Therefore, Sat is the only reality. Now, I'll just tell you what's coming up, and then we'll stop and think, because this is a lot of brain twisting today. What now the opponent is going to say is that, wait a second. You are using the same words. Existence was. How can you use two similar words? So opponent's going to say that. Then the opponent's going to say, not only that, but you're bringing in time. You said Sat, existence alone was. How can you bring time into this? I thought, this existence, preceded time. Why are you bringing time in there? And so then the Advaitin has a very, very beautiful answer to why time is there and to why these words are used. Sat, Asit. And then we come to kind of the conclusion of the argument, right? But that portion we'll see next week. Those answers are so beautiful. I also want to contemplate on them much, much deeper. So today we'll stop here. So we'll say the closing prayers, and then any questions, comments we'll take. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Namaha. Hari Om. Okay, pause this.